Okay, we'll be learning Likutei Sichos Chelik Chav Gimel, Parshas Nasso. So it talks about the Korban of the Nisim. We know that when they put up the Mishkan for the first 12 days, the Mishkan was put up on the Chodesh Nisan. For the first 12 days, every day, a different Nasi from a different Shevet brought certain Korbanos. Since they brought it every day and it's 12 days in a row, one of the days was Shabbos. So Shabbos, they also brought Korbanos. And the discussion here is going to be what together of bringing these Korbanos on Shabbos. We know that they bring Korbanos on Shabbos in the Beis Hamikdash always. The question is, what about these Korbanos? How did that work concerning the union of Shabbos? And there's going to be different Midrashim. The Sikha is a little bit complicated, not hard to understand. Maybe that also needs an explanation, but mainly it's complicated because you have a lot of different Midrashim, and you have to know how the Midrashim fit to each other and what is the different shittas in the Midrashim. So when Daf Halten Cheshbon, you have to keep track of what Midrashim we're talking about. So the Sikha starts like this: but Negedem Korban Nisim LaChanukah HaMizbeach Durchonosif V'Sheva Defrayim, concerning the Korban of the Nisim for the dedication of the Mizbeach that happened through the Nasi of Sheva Defrayim, was Zayin Akrov is given by Yom HaShabbos, that he was makrid on Shabbos. In other words, his day of being makrid was on Shabbos. Shteit the Medrash Rabbi the Pasha Seinu Pasha Yid Gimel. We have to keep the numbers. The Medrash Rabbi goes according to Parshas. So in Parsha Yud Gimel, and you see in order two, he says, which is base, like the Simon base of Parsha Yud Gimel, it says like this: Shleisha Dvorim she'osa hanisim shlei kehegen the Kippur Makadosh Baruch Hu. There are three things that the Nisim did not proper. They didn't do it right. And one of the three things is all over Bechlal, if it's a private korban, it's not pushing, doesn't push away Shabbos. All the korbanos that they brought in the Beis Hamikdash on Shabbos were all korban tzibur, the korban tomid that they brought every day for the tzibur, for the community, the one in the morning, one in the evening, korban musaf, all the korbanos tzibur you could bring on Shabbos. A korban yochid you can bring on Shabbos. So the Medrash here says in Parsha Yud Gimel that other places all over, korban yochid, a korban from an individual person, is not deicha Shabbos, doesn't push away Shabbos. Kan korban yochid deicha Shabbos, and here the korban yochid did deicha Shabbos. In other words, this Medrash considers the korban of the Nasi, all the Nisim, when they brought their korban, it was called the korban yochid. It was a korban from an individual. So really, it shouldn't be deicha Shabbos. So when they brought the korban, the simple pshat in the Medrash is they didn't do the right thing. But the pale, it was accepted by the Eibishter. So from here we see how much the Eibishter loved the korban of the Nisim. So that's why, even though it was Shalei Kehegen, they seemingly shouldn't have done it. Nevertheless, the Eibishter accepted it. Okay. Aber weiter, but further in Parsha Yud Dalet, it's another Medrash in the next Parsha. So the Medrash binyan zeh, the same meaning the Medrash says like this: Shalei timer, don't say hey chilul as Shabbos. How is Sheva the Nasi Sheva the Freim? How is he mechal Shabbos? Palei and korban yochid deichas Shabbos v'zeker v'Shabbos. We know individual korban does not push away Shabbos, and here is makir on Shabbos. So the answer is Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So David said le'ap piv also. It didn't do it on his own. Shani amarti l'Moshe. I told Moshe he should do it. That's what this Medrash says. Seems like machlokes, an argument. In Pashas Kumtuis, simple pshat comes out as leitin esh the Medrash. According to the first Medrash, in Akrova b'Shabbos, when they were makriv these korbanos in Shabbos, bitchiluk when built tirotzei. Tchila was not not a right thing to do. Shalei kehegen, it wasn't right. But b'diavad, it was done already. Mitzadem was korban nisim chavos ne'akadosh baruch. Since Hashem loves the korban of the nisim, is kiblu makadosh baruch. They should accept it. So the first Medrash says that it was not that they did it, shouldn't have done it, but they accepted it. Mashekelet and Zweite Medrash, but in the second Medrash, Yakrovas HaKorban b'Shabbos when l'chatchila given rotzei, that when they brought the korban nosi on Shabbos, it was l'chatchila the right thing to do, because while ani amarti l'Moshe, because the Medrash says that David says I told him to do it, so obviously it was the right thing to do. That's why it seems superficially over kadaikis, but if you start thinking about it, kemen eichleit ne'erst Medrash nit lernen as hakrovas had nosig ve'nosek. You can't learn even according to the first Medrash, which says that Shalei Kehegen. You can't learn that really it was osir. Really, it's a korban yochid, and they were not allowed to bring it. But Yevet Eivish accepted it. While chas v'sholem to sagen as anosi v'tzifin hepech hadin. Chas v'sholem to say that the Nossi will do the opposite of the din. The Eid v'ikir, even more than that, Meisha given there by when they brought the Kabbanis, Meisha was there. The Keyanim Giton Avidosa, the Levim B'Dechon, the Keyanim did their job, and the Levim did their job. Uzei alle Hepech Adin. And all of these did against the din. Etma, is that possible? That can be. Muss man sagen, if you have to say not the way it seems. As Eichleit dem Medrash is the Akrova B'Shabbos when Lechat Chilik when Apatzivut. Even the first Medrash, that's when he calls the Shaleika Hagen that it was not proper. It was Al Piatzivut. Also admits that the Eibush told him to do it. Sure, but because this was Hirosh and Rishon, it means only a halacha that was a time being, it was an exception to the rule. Other times, besides this time, this is forbidden. It's called Shaleik, not proper. Not because it was really osir. Something like this, Be'etzem, is not proper. But in this case, it was by Deibish told. And the Medish calls the Shaleik, not like we thought before. Shaleik Posha was wrong, and Deibish accepted it. B'diavad. Chatchila was the right thing. We just call it Shaleik. But so according to that, we have to understand. What is the logic of these two Midrashim? That the first Medrash calls it Shaleik Hagen. Even though we just said that this definite, the Medrash agrees that it was done because David said so. Nevertheless, the Medrash feels to call it Shaleik Hagen. Like in Zweiten Medrash, according to the second Medrash, he says, Nicht Chilul Shabbos. He's Hagen. According to verse Megid Bemis, it says Chilul Shabbos. But in this case, it wasn't. But something like this is still called Chilul Shabbos. Elamai, David said they should do it. The second Medrash says, like it wasn't Chilul Shabbos. This is fulfilling David's Rotzen. Seems like they're both really the same thing. The way we thought the first Medrash holds the Taka was also David accepted with the Eved, so it's a big difference to two Medrashim. Second Medrash says it was the right thing to do. The first Medrash it wasn't. But now that we came to the conclusion that the first Medrash also holds that it was mutter. So he calls it Shaleika. Why does he call it Shaleika Hagen if it was mutter? And the second Medrash says it's fine. It was done properly. Why does the first Medrash call it Shaleika Hagen? What's the svara behind it? Then the Rebbe brings another thing. Gemara bet gebracht. Gemara may have gotten brought at the top. We'll see how the Gemara will bring a raya whether it was proper or not. The Gemara says at the time of Bisman Chanukas Beis Hamikdash edition that why in the time when they dedicated the first Beis Hamikdash Lei also Yisrael Asiyim HaKippurim, the Yidden did not keep Yom Kippur then. Interesting. This was Yom Kippur is one of the days of the Chanukas HaMizbeach, Chanukas Beis Hamikdash, and they did not keep the 8 on that Yom Kippur. And the Gemara says why? By the Omru Kal V'Chemer. He said we have a Kal V'Chemer. Ma Mishkan Shem Tisha Seila Mada by the Mishkan. The Kedusha of the Mishkan is a lower level of Kedusha than the Kedusha of the Beis Hamikdash. The Mishkan is not a Mishkan that's forever. It was only for a temporary thing. And it was a Korban Yochid. We're talking about the Korban that they brought, Korban of Ephraim, brought the Korban on Shabbos, but it was a Korban Yochid. Nevertheless, Deiche Shabbos, that pushed away Shabbos because it's Chanukas HaMizbeach. Even though it's a Isser Skila, it's a Isser of getting stoned. If Chal Shabbos, you get stoned. So from that, they learned a Kal V'Chemer, Migdosh, Kedushos, Kedush Seilon. So by the Bisa Migdosh, which is a Kedusha forever. And it was a Korban Tzibur. And Yom Kippur on Shkoras. Yom Kippur is a lower level. For the desecrating Mechal Yom Kippur is not as strict as being Mechal Shabbos. So if by Mechal Shabbos, which is strict worse, and it was for the Mishkan, which is not as strong as the Beis Hamikdash, and it was a Korban Yochid, they were allowed to be Mechal Shabbos. So this by the Beis Hamikdash, for them is movement. For that we understand. Aladasa Gemara is the Akrova b'Shabbos by Chanukas HaMishkan Nikiven Kanei Rosh Shaleik Hagen. So it comes out according to the Gemara, this was not something an exception to the rule. We just said before that the first Medrash calls it Shaleik Hagen. Why does it call it Shaleik Hagen? That it was done not properly? Not because they were not allowed. They were allowed to. But it was an exception. Such a thing never ever happened. It's not something that you're allowed. It was an exception. But from here is the Gemara is mashmanat. Not for the Medrash Hanal, Halafa, not like the first Medrash. But Demult, because if this would have been a special Sibuy of the Eibishter, and really it's not, it's called Chilul Shabbos, but in this case, the Eibishter was matir. But if that would be so, but Demult, what man from them, you can't uplearn with a Kal V'Chemer, if the Kabbalah Sheba Chanukas Beis Hamikdash. You couldn't make a Kal V'Chemer. If it's a special Yitzim in Aklal, so if it's a special thing that the Eibishter says, how could you learn out from there? That was a special thing that the Eibishter said, this is an exception to the rule. How could you learn a kal v'chemer? If it was not an exception to the rule, then you can say, if here it was good, at the Beis Shabbat it was good. So the fact that the Gemara makes a kal v'chemer, a siman, the Gemara holds that it was not an exception to the rule. So it doesn't fit to the first medrash. The first medrash also agrees. We said that it was allowed, but it's called yetzem min haklal. It's called an exception to the rule. Heiro asho. The second medrash doesn't look that way. The second medrash says it was allowed. So the Gemara seems to fit to the second medrash that it was not called shalei kegen. It's allowed. The svaras are plukte zwischen the medrash aleph and the Gemara medrash base. Now to explain, so what is the argument here between the first medrash and the second medrash and the Gemara? Because we just finished saying that the Gemara seems to hold like the second medrash that it's not called shalei kegen. It's not called an exception to the rule. So the svara of this machlekes, tziter heter akrova b'Shabbos is given ayro ashor underneath. Whether this bringing the korban on Shabbos was a hero ashor, was an exception to the rule or not, so you could explain that machlekes, because the Rebbe asked, what's the svara of the machlekes? I said, we have many ways to explain it. Umayhem. In other words, the Rebbe is going to say two svaras. That means the Rebbe knows more svaras, but many svaras. But I'll tell you two. One svara is like this: the Gemara and that medrash, the second medrash, who holds it was not an exception to the rule. That late mandomer was halt a shevet ikrekol, goes according to the opinion as a machlekes in Gemara in Herius, whether a shevet, a whole shevet, is called a kol, is called a tzibur. And it says kol in the Torah, normally it means klal yisrael. But there is an opinion that says that every shevet itself is considered kol. And there's another opinion that says no, only klal yisrael, all the Yidden are called kol, not the shevet. So you could say like this: the Gemara and the second medrash that says it was not a yetzem min haklal, it was not an exception to the rule, it was not a rosh, goes according to the opinion that the shevet is called tzibur. Oh, if the shevet is called tzibur, why is it also to do? When the yes of the korban of the nosia given is been a korban of shevet, since the korban that he brought was a korban of the whole shevet, it is nitken rosh. It's nitken rosh. But it's korban kol. It's a korban of a tzibur, of a kol. Even as makav yalakabon a tzibur v'zanya deicha Shabbos. Shabbos they brought kabbanas in the Beis English, but we said before, korban tzibur was allowed. Korban yochid was not allowed. So the Gemara that says that this was not a yetzim min haklal, not a exception to the rule, not a rosh, goes according to opinion that since it was for the shevet is called a tzibur, it's called a kol. And also the Gemara roofed us on korban yochid, even though the Gemara does mention the kal v'chemer was madoch over there, it was a korban yochid. It's a mikdash Shabbat. So the Gemara does call it korban yochid. He says in Frank some korban tomid the kayetzim b'seishel fun of compared to the korban tomid that they brought before this and they brought later in the afternoon. Compared to that, this is called the korban yochid because the korban tomid is really from the whole klal Yisrael. This was not from klal Yisrael, so you could call it korban yochid in relative to the korban tomid. So he calls it yochid, but really it's not a korban yochid. If you hold every shevet itself, it's called a kol. This is not a korban yochid. So that's what the Gemara says. This was allowed. This was allowed, and it's not called shalei kegen. It's not a rosh because it's a korban tzibur. The whole reason we're saying why it's called a rosh because a korban yochid cannot be brought on Shabbos. So this was an exception. But if it's not a korban yochid, if you go according to the opinion, every shevet is a tzibur, so it's not an exception. The first medrash says which was shalei kegen, and we said before, what does it mean? Not that it was osir, but it's still called something that is a yetzim and lakal, an exception that the Eibush made at that time, goes according to the opinion that a shevet is not a kol. So this korban of the nosi had a din like a regular korban yochid, which normally is not a Shabbos. And the heter akrov is given to the hera. And the reason you're allowed because it is a hera from the Eibush. So that's one way to explain that. The first medrash learns that this was a hera because it was called a korban yochid, because a shevet is not a kol, so it's a yochid. The second medrash and the Gemara holds that this was a korban tzibur because a shevet is called tzibur, but maybe it's not an exception, and that's when you can make a kal v'chemer because this was a normal thing. That's one way to explain the svaras of the two midrashim, the first medrash and the second one together with the Gemara. A second beer, l'kul al shevet dikar kol. You can say no. Be'emes, everyone agrees that one shevet is called a kol. So l'chur, according to that, it shouldn't be a hirashah. If everyone holds that shevet is a kol, so certainly you were able to do it. So what would be the reason of the first medrash that holds that this is called Heira Shor called Shleik Eigen. But the Korban on Nisim hat jeder Nossi gebracht von seinem Eigen. Oh, there was a special thing here is that the Korban that they brought, even though they brought it on behalf of the whole Shevet, but they had to use his own money. It was made with his own money. Nicht von dem, was the Shevet Bechlole hat gegeben. Not that the Shevet made a collection of all the whole Shevet and gave it. Hier steht befehlische Medrash. When Rashi brings it, it says Medrash clearly, and Rashi in Chumash brings it. This losh, he brought his own money, used his own money, and he didn't collect from the Shevet. Oh. So now we have something here that this korban, everyone agrees it was a korban tzibur. Why? Because every Shevet itself is called a tzibur. But here there's another aspect which makes it turn into a yochid. When the machlekes between the Medrash or Aleph with the Gemara, the argument in the first Medrash, which says it was a Rosh, and the second, and the Gemara and the second Medrash, who says it was not a Rosh, is like this. The Dasa Medrash, according to the first Medrash, we bald the Nossi for them korban need since the Nossi, when he brought this korban, did not collect the money from the whole Shevet, Leib is together from the korban yochid. So it remains a korban yochid, even though it's for the whole Shevet, but they didn't pay for it. See, regular korban tzibur, the whole tzibur pays for it. Like korban tomid, you collect money, the machzah shekel, and the money that everyone gave goes for the korban tzibur. So this, be'emes is on behalf of the tzibur, because every Shevet is called a tzibur. But since it was not collected from them, it was his own money, so it's called the korban yochid. He holds. Was is nicht der Shabbos, the korban is not the Shabbos. Und der Fahr davon sagen, der hätte der korban in Rosh. So the fact they were allowed to was especially Rosh, because even though it has an aspect of korban tzibur, but it also has an aspect of korban yochid. And first Medrash holds that's the main aspect. Shekel dasa Gemara, but the Gemara and the second Medrash hold is chot mishalei hevi. They hold that even though it was his own money he brought, is that hevi aber ben alzomata Yehuda came to visit. But when he brought from his own money, he still brought it on behalf of the Shevet. Let's say Shevet Yehuda or another Shvatim. Yichsei HaKosev al Shifta, there's a lotion that the Sifri Rasha say, the Torah is meyaches this to the Shevet. So as much as it was his own money, but it was on behalf of the Shevet. According to the ganze Shevet, it's according to the whole Shevet. He's sein korban, according to Tzibur, but it's Peicha Shabbos. So his korban is called the korban Tzibur. That's why it's not a Rosh, it's allowed. The korban Tzibur is allowed. Which basically means that there are two aspects in this korban of the Nosi. There's an aspect that makes it look like a korban Tzibur, because it's for the whole Shevet. If you hold that every Shevet is called a kol, it's called a tzibur. But the second pshat that Rebbe says, first pshat is that that's the machlek, is whether it's tzibur or not. Korban one says it's a tzibur, but there was another aspect of the yochid, and the machlek is which side is stronger, which side do we look? So the Medrash it says it was a rosh, it was shleik eigen, says that the yochid side is stronger, but maybe it's called a korban yochid. So it was a rosh because the yochid you can't bring a korban. The Gemara and the second Medrash showed it was the side of the tzibur is the stronger side, and it's called the korban tzibur. Maybe it's normally allowed because the korban tzibur could be brought on Shabbos. Yeshleimer, the Rebbe says, as the meat is the dik haloshon medrash. This will explain the loshon medrash. The fact that we have two sides to it will explain the medrash. Different medrash. The medrash says like the Zog, where Zog, the medrash says, as from zeh korban nachshem and aminoda. But the first korban, when the pasuk says it, then after it tells us the details of the korban, it says zeh korban. Nachshem and Aminoda. This is the korban Nachshem. So the Gemara says, the Medrash says, lengthen up as Meshalei Hevi, Velesha Gava Meshifte Hevi. From that we learn out that it was his korban, meaning Nachshem and Aminoda's korban. It was his korban, meaning he did not collect money from anybody else. Was er sagt that the Sima Inyan, and it says at the end there, Zeh korban Deichas HaShabbos, and this korban is Deichas HaShabbos, ve'ein korban Yochid Deichas HaShabbos. And the korban Yochid is not Deichas HaShabbos. That's the lotion of the Medrash. Now, when the Medrash says this is Deicha Shabbos and a korban yochid is not Deicha Shabbos. Now let's look at it this way: if this korban is also called a korban yochid, the lotion should have been different. The lotion should have been this is Deicha Shabbos and other korbanos yochid are not Deicha Shabbos. The word other, but it doesn't say that. It doesn't say the ein shar korban yochid Deicha Shabbos against it. He says, this is Deicha, a korban yochid is not. So he's mashme, the korban nanos is not together from korban yochid. It's not a korban yochid. Because if this would be a korban yochid, and nevertheless this one is mutter, so he should have said this is mutter. Other similar korbanos yochid are not mutter. So on one hand, the Medrash is telling us that this is not called a korban yochid. Aber leidoch, on the other hand, from diuk haloshem betchilas halimut, but when you look at the beginning, when you learn it says, Zeh korban deichas haShabbos, This korban is Deicha Shabbos. We have a limud saying this korban, and he's telling us a chidush. From the word zeh, we learn out this Deicha Shabbos. What does that show? Why do you need a limit for it? If it's a korban sibur, like it's mashra from the end, it says this is Deicha Shabbos, korban yochid is not. It's mashra to tzibur, but if it's completely, it's a korban sibur. So why do you need a limit for it? Korban sibur, we know it's Deicha Shabbos. So the fact that it says zeh Deicha Shabbos, and especially from the fact that you need a special posik, a special word in the posik to teach you that this is Deicha Shabbos, is mashma, the korban anosit hashayich, it's a korban yochid. If you need a posik to tell you, means it has a connection to korban yochid. And the father from Alim with meyuchad of them sukkot mezeh as it is Deicha Shabbos. So we need a special limit learn now from a pasuk that is Deicha Shabbos. So which one is it? So if you look at this medrash that we just quoted seems like a contradiction. On one hand, is mashma that this is a korban yochid. That's why it says we need a limud that is Deicha Shabbos. If it be tzibur, you wouldn't need a limud. On the other hand, it says this is Deicha Shabbos, but a korban yochid is not a mashma. It's korban tzibur. Which one is it? Apianal is moving based on what you understood. But it's true. There's both. This has both aspects. Since he didn't collect the money from a shevet, he gave private money. Kumtu is that the korban is a korban yochid, so it has it's a gather of yochid. Is a nosi lamate, but since he was makriv as a nosi to the shevet and it was on behalf of the shevet, so we see what we said before that it has both. So going back to the machlekes, so the first medrash says that this was shaleikeg, and then there was a special din holds that the yochid part stronger. B'meila you could not bring it on Shabbos. B'meila it was especially Rosh Hashanah, and the Gemara, the second medrash, holds that this sibur aspect is stronger. B'meila you're allowed to bring it, and it was not a Rosh Hashanah. This is a regular din, and we take a see for this other medrash never brought from the L'shein is there that has both. Apiko and Alkumtuis, and the zweite medrash in Naltipao. So it comes out according to this that the second medrash was late is the akrofa from korban and also b'Shabbos from the chatchila when I kegen. That the second medrash holds that bringing the korban on Shabbos was l'chatchila fine. There's no problem with it. And das a Gemara hainach, and the Gemara is the same thing. When the Gemara makes the kal b'chemer ma'od, they were allowed to bring this by this korban of the Nasso of Ephraim on Shabbos, certainly by Samikdash. Obviously, this is not a Rosh Hashanah. So the second medrash and the Gemara are the same thing. They both hold of the opinion that this was a korban sibur, and the male you were allowed to do it. As a makir again, korban b'Shabbos was a korban sibur. So they both hold that it was makir and Shabbos because it's a korban sibur. But different to onkem it's a Rosh Hashanah. You don't have to say that this is a Rosh Hashanah, that this is a special din. It's not a special din. It's a korban yochid, which normally not allowed, and here you're allowed. It's especially a Rosh Hashanah. It's a yetsim exception. But according to the Gemara and according to the second medrash, it's not. Obviously, shver azay to lernen loshna medrash. In the medrash, it's hard to say that what the Gemara says and this medrash, the second medrash says, is exactly the same thing. Because it's hard to use it, explain that, put it into the words of the medrash. The medrash says, lay al pi voso shani amarti l'meishi nosechot. David says, in the second medrash, it says, he didn't do it on his own. I told Moshe that this should happen. Hainu, it means, as a second, that means that David says, it's okay what they did. Because I told them to. Obviously, it is a Rosh Hashanah. It seems it's a Rosh Hashanah. Because if he says, I had to tell him to do it, if it's a regular korban tzibur, like the Gemara comes out, it's a regular korban tzibur, not a Rosh Hashanah at all. And if the medrash holds, second medrash also holds it to the regular Rosh Hashanah, so why does the medrash say that David just said, don't worry, he didn't do it on his own, I told him to. He says, similar to Rosh Hashanah. So it seems like, even though generally speaking, the second medrash and the Gemara seem to be saying the same thing, that they both l'chatchila okay, both hold the l'chatchila okay, but when the Gemara is mashma, it's not a Rosh Hashanah. The Gemara is mashma, that's they learn a kal b'chemer, just like that you're allowed here also. If it's a Rosh Hashanah, you can't learn out from that this korban to the Hamikdash, because from a Rosh Hashanah you can never learn out a limud. But the medrash holds also as l'chatchila muter, but it still looks like it's a Rosh Hashanah. Because you needed the special, that the Eibush should special say it. Now, maybe there's another way you could learn. That this goof is what the Eibush said. The Eibush said that this is a korban tzibur. That goof of the Eibush, when the Eibush said that didn't do it on his own, but I told him to, doesn't mean that I told him that he's allowed to bring the korban. I told him that this is a korban tzibur. But automatically you're allowed, not a Rosh Hashanah. So the Rebbe says, a movement by Pasha, it's very simple, clear. As is a deichek he godel zu sagen. It's a big deichek. Hard to say. Der Ania Marti leMoshe Nossi Echad. When the Medrash says that Abisha said, I told Moshe Nossi Echad to bring, meint benit amiras Nossi Echad the game. Doesn't mean when he said this din that he should bring the korban. Meant something else. And saying that the Abisha didn't say specifically legabe this, but das meint the Arab in Koli Laderis. Hashem call. According to the first shot we said before, we could touch maybe that when Abisha said I told him to do it, doesn't mean I told him that he could bring the korban. I told him that a shevet is called a tzibur. Automatically you're allowed to. Or the other thing, according to the second shot, as korban nanosit adim from korban hashevet. That even though it's korban, shevet is called a tzibur, but you still need a limud. Not a limud. That Abisha should say that you don't look at the yochid part, but you look at the tzibur part, like the second shot. It's not mashma. It's mashma when the Medrash says that Abisha, I told him to bring the korban. So if it comes to this, that the Abisha said, I told him to bring the korban, that's what the Medrash means. But if it's not a Yerah Shah, as we said before, then why did the Abisha have to tell him to bring the korban? It's not a Yerah Shah, means it's a regular din. A din that this is a korban tzibur, and you're allowed to, a korban tzibur, you can bring on Shabbos. So what does it mean that Abisha said is mashma is a Yerah Shah? Now comes back to Kasha. So now we're saying the Gemara Taka holds it's not a Rosh Hashanah. But the second Medrash admits that it's a Rosh Hashanah because Abish had to give him a special heter. So now we're back to the question. So what's the difference between the first Medrash and the second Medrash? The first Medrash says it's a Rosh Hashanah. Really, they shouldn't have done it's a Rosh Hashanah. The second Medrash holds the same way because the second Medrash said Abish had to give a special tzibur. That's Simon Rosh Hashanah. So we're back to the question. If both hold it's a Rosh Hashanah, why does the first Medrash hold that it's Shaloik Eing Bemis, it's not good, but there was a Rosh Hashanah, and the second Medrash says it was good. But it's also a Rosh Hashanah. What does a Rosh Hashanah mean? That because of a special situation, they allowed it. Is Mashma Betzim, it's not allowed. So the Chur is saying the same thing, but it seems like they're saying different. First Medrash says that it's a Shaloik Eing, and the second Medrash says not. So what must be the Pshat? So we can't say the Pshat we said before. Because according to the Pshat before, the second Medrash holds that it's not a Rosh Hashanah, it's a din of Korban Tzibur. What we said from the Lashon is not Mashma, that this is not a Rosh Hashanah. So we need to answer the kasha. Yeshleimer Rabbi, as I said, you can say the Pshat like this. Leib beide Midrashim seine die Kabbanas Hameluim Chalukas Hamazbeach was ein Kneis and Adin and Nor Lefisho together Rosh Hashanah. Both Midrashim hold that all the Kabbanas that he brought B'chlal by the Meluim. This is the Kabbanas Nisim brought after the Shchit Shnisim from that day on, after the Mishkan was put up permanently. But 7 days before it was put up temporarily, and they brought Okabon. Those are called the Shivas Miyam Meluim. A lot of dinim there was not normal. Special exceptions to the rule of karbonis. Because ein kameis of the data, there are certain karbonis they brought. There's no other carbon like that in the later generations. So it was definitely Fisha. Side Nossi also. The karbonis Meluim from Zeyach, so it's not Fisha. Begeder Erosh. It's called the Erosh. The Tebish said. Azay. Wie die andere Protein von Karbonis Hanasim is a given l'show, beged the Rosh. Like he fight other details. Now the whole thing we're talking about Shabbos, whether you're allowed to bring in a Shabbos. But there's so many other details in what the Karbonis are that's not normal. It's not the regular dinim. Like you don't find those dinim again. So this was a Rosh for sure. Well, there was a Bekama from the Karbonis Yemei Meluim, the 7 days before they put the Mishkan permanently. Also, there were things that was a Rosh. So that's not a question. That it's called Rosh means it was a Yetzim, and like it's an exception to the rule. Nor mitzader Rosh shows given der heter to makar and the korban nosi b'Shabbos, and therefore the whole thing was a special din. So why were they allowed to bring Shabbos? Part of that, part of the special exception to the rule that all the details of these korbanos was a special Rosh. So for sure, so everyone will agree that this is a Rosh. But we're trying to explain what the machlokes. But the heter kemelen of tzvei. This concept that there's a Rosh Hashanah, which means be'etzem you shouldn't have done it, and this was a special din, you could learn 2 ways. One is concerning Shabbos, the fact that you could do it on Shabbos. The Isra Shabbos is tchuya. We know that when certain things are allowed, when normally they're not allowed, there are 2 ways to look at it. You could look at it tchuya or hutra. Tchuya means it's pushed away. There's a Isra, and there's a certain situation where you're allowed to. You push away that Isra. What you're supposed to do now overpowers that Isser, and you're allowed to do it. That means there Isser remains. There is still an Isser, but there's something else more important and stronger pushes away. Hutra means it's matirit. It allows it. Not to push away the Isser. The Isser is not there. In this situation, the Isser is not there. So you can learn this also. The Rosh Hashanah is a general din. This oldest was a Rosh Hashanah. When the Rosh Hashanah allowed it to do it on Shabbos, you can learn two ways. You can learn the first way is that Isser Shabbos is Tchuya. It was pushed away. And the Isser Malacha is Betok V'Yemet. That the Isser that you're not allowed to do a Malacha, which is Shech the Korban and do all the things by a Korban. In this case of the Korban is a strong Isser. The Chanukas HaMizbeach is as Deiche. Because of Chanukas HaMizbeach, the dedication of Mizbeach is stronger and that pushes away that Isser. In other words, you're allowed to do the Isser. That means the Isser is there, but you're allowed to do the Isser. Or the Naefen von Hutra, or it was Mutter. And the Melacha is the Melacha Tchila nicht Nesse geworden. Nor sie hat aber a Mutter b'Shabbos. In this case, the Melacha was not Osir. Normally, this is a Mos in the Melacha, but now the Eibishter allowed it, which means the Eibishter said that it's not Osir. It's over a Mutter b'Shabbos. Al derech ha-machlekes bin yipikuach nefesh b'Shabbos. The Kama Lochas. This is Deicha Mutter. He gives an example, other cases. We know that the Pikuach Nefesh, someone's life is in danger, allowed to be Mechal Shabbos. So the whole discussion in the Poskim and the Meforshim, how is it? Is it that the Pikuach Nefesh is Deicha Shabbos? Because it's a Sakonis of Forshim that's more important than keeping Shabbos, so it pushes away the Isser Shabbos. So as we would say, the Torah allows you to do the Isser Shabbos. So there's a Isser, but you're allowed to do the Isser. Or no, when it comes to Pikuach Nefesh, there is no Isser to begin with. And the same thing with many other halachas. What we find to have other dinim. So same thing, you can learn these two ways. And that is the argument in Madrashah. They both hold, as we said before, it's a Rosh Hashanah. Even the second Medrash, which says it was Lachatchila allowed, holds the Rosh Hashanah. That's why he says the Eibush says, I told him to do it. I had to tell him especially to do it. But the Machlekes is, how was it? Was it Tchuya or Hutra? Later, the Rosh Hashanah also seems like according to the first Medrash that they did it, it wasn't Gehagen, it wasn't the right thing to do. So it doesn't mean Chas v'Sholom they did something wrong. They were allowed to do it, but what it means is that Heter HaKrov and Making Tchuya. So when they were allowed to bring it, it was pushed away. The Shabbos was pushed away. The Karbonos of Deiche given the Misa Shabbos. The Karbonos pushed away Isa Shabbos. On a side, they pushed it to the side. It's there, but don't care about it. Push to the side. Well, Lacher at Tchiyah that Isa Mitzadatzmei is bottled one. Even after it pushed away, the Isser is there. He said there is Betzem a Isa Mitzadatzmei, and then there's a Isser of doing this Malach HaShabbos, bringing the Korban. Or a very place Nitcha, the far was Korban is Simcha, but it's pushed away. Basically, don't care about it. Because David should love the Korban Nisim, that's what the first Medrash holds. So he calls it Shleik Eigen, because even after you were allowed, not Chas v'Sholom doing against David Shesrotzen, you were allowed, there's an Easter there, and they did the Easter. They were allowed to do the Easter. That's Zweite Medrash halt over, Ados is Beifim Hutre. The second one holds no. And the Torah allowed it, but the Hiro Hasho, Take Hiro Hasho, was matiret. As haste, she's a Geder Shal Dvar Hetet. What they did was mutter. Hakrovas, Karbonas, Chanukas, Amazbeich, B'Shabbos, in them fall, in this case, because it's Chanukas HaMizbeach, there's no Isa Shabbos. It's not about you pushed away this, there's no Isa Shabbos. But the far is the Medrash Madgish, that's why the Medrash expresses, nicht nur, kann man nicht sagen, Chilas HaShabbos, or the Shleike. That's what the Medrash says. You can't say, because the Medrash says the Loshen, as we look back at the second Medrash, second Medrash says the Loshen here, you might say, Shalei Teimar, hey, Chila Shabbos. Don't say that you could say Chila. No, he wasn't Chila Shabbos. That's exactly what he means. It wasn't Chila Shabbos. According to the first way, it was Chila Shabbos, but you're allowed to Chila Shabbos. But the second way, he stresses, you can't say Chila Shabbos, Chila Shabbos, or the Shalei Kehegnis wasn't proper. Nor other Rabbi says, Akiyum Tzivu Leal Pips Osel Shani Amarti. They would forget this was a proper thing to do, and it's not Chila Shabbos because I told him to do it. But the way he told him to do it is not don't care about Shabbos. There is no Isa Shabbos here. So we understand very easily, very good, the difference between the first Medrash and the second Medrash. Now we'll explain. We brought another Medrash before. The end of Sibbeis, he brought another Medrash. Not the first one or the second one. They brought a Medrash concerning Zeh Korban Nachshim and Aminodov. That from the Posik Zeh Korban Nachshim and Aminodov, we learn that Mishalei Hevi, that he brought from his own money, not from the Shavit. So we understand, for was the in Medrash now, even Posik Zeh Korban Nachshim game, when he quotes the Posik, this is the Korban Nachshim, stay the Loshen, Zeh Korban Deiches HaShabbos, Vein Korban Yoch Deiches HaShabbos. He starts out like this. This is the Korban that's Deiches Shabbos. Korban Yoch is not Deiches Shabbos. So what is he saying here? Frier wird gesagt, wie der Din ist da beim Korban Nossi. First he starts off by saying, this Korban is Deiche. Zeh Korban Deiche, this Korban is Deiche. Und then noch, wie der Din ist bei Korban Yoch, Bechlal, Vein Korban Yoch. And then he continued, but other Not, it doesn't say the way other, but a korban yochid is not there. Is that the right way we should say it? But das ist the Seder Hoffnung, this is an opposite Seder, wie es wird gesagt, die Medrash and sie fallen. It's the opposite the way it says in the first Medrash. The first Medrash, it says, the Chol Mokim starts off with the negative. All over, ein Korban Yochid Deiches HaShabbos. Normally, Korban Yochid is not Deiches. But can Korban Yochid Deiches HaShabbos. Here, Korban Yochid Deiches HaShabbos. So this other Medrash we brought, the middle Medrash, not the first or the second, but the other one, there it says the other way. That says, this is Deiches Shabbos, Korban Yochid is not. What normally is trying to say that even though this is part of the Korban Yochid and Korban Yochid not Deiches, this is an exception. It doesn't say that. It says this is Deiches Shabbos. Korban Yochid is not. Yesh Leimar. So you can say the Shinu is totally in the Tzvei Yifanim. This change is different, depends on the two Yifanim. Late Nerd and Esh the Medrash does blaze the Chuya. According to the first Medrash canal, as we said before, it's only pushing it away. And Rebbe, how does he say it over there? Is there Medrash Magdim? So the Medrash starts off, we call Mokim Ein Korban Yochid Deiches Shabbos. Generally, Korban Yochid is not Deiches. Because as we said before, he holds that even in this case, Be'etzim you're not allowed to. Even though they were B'peil allowed to, it was Deiches. But you should know that Korban Yochid is not Deiches Shabbos. But das is Madgish wie mit Zadatzmei B'chlal, it is a Maisa Osir Shleikegen. So telling you, you should know, this Be'etzim is a Maisa Osir. It's Shleikegen. Was nor kan, wird es nicht. Here it, you're allowed. In them fall, in this case, you're allowed. So he starts off over there by saying, normally not allowed, because even this is not allowed. Be'etzim. So pale this korban is Deiches Shabbos, because it's Deiches. Hashekelit Medrash and Posik Zeh Korban Nachshon, but this other Medrash where it says Zeh Korban Nachshon, it says the opposite. Zeh is Deiches, and the Korban Yochid is not. He starts off that this is allowed. That goes according to the opinion as is Hutra. That your mama allowed, it's not Deiches. When the far hebt on, Zeh Korban Deiches HaShabbos. This korban is okay, you're allowed to. But the Akdama V'Akdosha is do if them din veheter miyuchat from korban nanosi. That there's a special din. You're allowed to do it, even though he uses the word Deiche. But what he means to say is this korban is a Yerah Shah. But which way did the Yerah Shah happen? That there's a special heter that you're allowed to do it. Was mitzad dem is zeh megem bring Shabbos. You're allowed to bring Shabbos. He doesn't start with saying korban yochid you're not allowed because he holds that it's mutter. It's mutter, not chuya. Und der noch that zählt man as vein korban yochid Deiches Shabbos. But then you should know korban yochid is not, but this is allowed. So this goes with the shitta of the second medrash that this is not Deiches Shabbos, but this is mutter Shabbos. He just uses the word Deiches, but he starts by saying this is allowed on Shabbos. You'll see base. I laid the medrash and post the korban nosi al derech korban hashevet tzibur. We said before as he base that according to this medrash, why does he say? Doesn't he say other korban yochid is not deiche? Because this is not a korban yochid. That's what we said before. The medrash holds it's a korban tzibur. Can we sagen as das is a tam besibus aplukte from the zwei medrashim? He says the reason is because the second medrash holds the medrash that's not this medrash. It says zeh korban. That this is a korban tzibur. This could be the reason for the original the machlekes we said. We said the machlekes is whether it's tchuya or hut. That's the first medrash holds the tchuya. That even though you're allowed to, the Easter is there, but you're allowed to do the Easter. Second medrash holds hut. No more Easter here. What's the reason behind this machlekes? Why does the first one taka hold it's only tchuya and the second one holds it's hutro? So you could say it depends taka on this, whether it's a korban yochid or a korban tzibur. Leib, according to the first method, which says it's shleik, it's not proper because it's tchuya is a korban nosa korban yochid because he also korban yochid. If verstandig von dem loschen bekommen, mokim in korban yochid, kan korban yochid. The medrash says that loschen. All over a korban yochid is not deiche, but here the korban yochid is deiche. So we see clearly that the first medrash shows it's a korban yochid. Und der far, since it's a korban yochid. The Pharaoh, the Yerah Shah, so since it remains a korban yochid, be'etzim you're not allowed. So even though the Torah Deibishter allowed it, it said you should do it, not only that, it said you should do it, but because be'etzim it's a korban yochid, it's only tchuya, only pushed away. Shenkelit medrash zeh korban deiche, the medrash where it says zeh korban deiche, starting off that this is okay, as it's hot adin al derech v'akorban hashevet. This is because it has a din like a korban tzibur. Shabbos that's why Shabbos is mutter. So it comes out that Rebbe is Metabech combines this with before. The Svara, the Machlek has been the first medrash. Second medrash is whether it's first medrash is Tchuya, the Isser is there, but you're allowed to do it. The second one is no Isser. But that gufa is connected to whether it's a korban yochid or korban tzibur. That the first one holds it's a korban yochid, so therefore, even when the Torah was mated, it's still a korban yochid. So be'etzim is also. That's why it's chuya. And the second medrash holds that it's a korban tzibur. But maybe it's takahutim, and the Torah said you're allowed, even though it's a rosh, as we said before, because everything here is a rosh. The whole korbanos of the miluyim and the korbanos is a rosh. Al pizeh betobaruskim, and according to it will come out as by the binyonin and arinian is in them gather for hutra gufa domadrashim chalukim. Will come out that even if you hold hutra, there's also difference in the madrashim. Till now we just said two things: chuya or hutra. Chuya means it's the isur is there, but you're allowed to do it. The second one means that you're allowed. There's no isur. But it will come out that it's not so poshut. Late the medrash azek korban deicha Shabbos, according to the medrash that we said, the other medrash, not the first, not the second, the other medrash, that zek korban, this korban is deicha Shabbos. Zek korban this korban deicha Shabbos. So we're saying is Shabbos hutra, but the korban on nosi al derech korban tzibur. Why taki is a hutra? Because when he starts off by saying this is mutter, korban yochid is osir, is because he holds that this is allowed. But why is it allowed? Because it's not a korban yochid. That's what we're saying now. That's why it's hutra. Mashenke like the medrash anal sifalev, but according to the second medrash that we brought before, where it says shalei temer heiche, you shouldn't ask how is you mechal Shabbos. Well, ain't korban yochid deicha. Korban yochid is not deicha. And the answer is, don't worry. I said it was halt. We said before that the second medrash also holds hutra. That's why, according to him, it's kohegim. Kenal sivdalet is mashma is hot yatadin from korban yochid. But there it comes out, takit was hutra, but it's still called korban yochid. It's still korban yochid, but why is it allowed? Because it's taka hutra, but not because it's a korban tzibur. So it comes out like this. Comes out a new thing now. There's one that says tchuya, finished. Then we have hutra. In hutra gufa, there's two refining to learn. You could say, why is it taka mutter? Because it's a korban tzibur. That's the other medrash, the third medrash that Rabbi brought. There it says, that korban is allowed. Korban yochid not. So why is it allowed? Because it's a korban tzibur. Mashenkin, the second medrash also holds hutra. That's why he says it's kehegin. But he doesn't hold it's a korban tzibur, holds it's korban yochid. So there's some other machlekes here. In hutra gufa, there is a machlekes between the second medrash and the third medrash that Rebbe brought. Wird man das verstehen bei Hagrim noch a vierten medrash? In Parsha Yudala, there's another medrash, fourth medrash. So far, I have two medrashim. The first one says it's like Hagen. The second one said that don't think it was Chilul Shabbos, not Chilul Shabbos. Obviously, it's hutra, but he still calls it korban yochid. And the other medrash where it says that zek korban is allowed on Shabbos, it's a korban tzibur. So in hutra gufu yel machlekes. What's the pshat? So he says there's another medrash be'inyan zeh. There's other shayim. Medrash is like this. Mihig the mani v'ashalom is a pasuk. It says, "Who came before me and I'll pay him back." What does that mean? That because somebody did something earlier, that's why the Eibishter later paid him for it. And he gives an example. This is talking about davar b'yosef. Shahu higdim v'shimras haShabbos actually nitna. Yosef, we have learned. We learned now Yosef kept Shabbos, even though Torah wasn't given. There was no din Shabbos. He kept it. Hashem said, Yosef, Ata shamartas haShabbos actually nitna Torah. You kept Shabbos before the Torah was given. Chayecha, I swear, shani mishalom leben bincha. I will pay you for that to your grandchild. Shemakriv karbonos b'Shabbos, that he will bring karbonos haShabbos. Ma'ashe'ein yochid makriv. A yochid is not allowed to bring a korban. V'olai lekabel karbonos b'rotz. I will accept this korban. So in other words, because Yosef kept Shabbos, he says that's why you have a schar that your grandson will bring the korban haShabbos, even though it's a yochid, which a yochid can bring, but I'll accept it. That's the medrash. Is tomoa not understood. He passed the zogim at the schar of shmira Shabbos. Makar kabana v'Shabbos mashen yochid makar. How could he say he's getting a reward for keeping Shabbos? That what? That his grandson is going to machal Shabbos. He's going to bring a korban Shabbos, which you're not allowed because it's a korban yochid. Apula velch is bechlal der heipach mishmira Shabbos. Because he kept Shabbos, he'll get the Zainikel will do something against Shabbos. Where keep Shabbos there? Leib miboya the korban nosi is lays deichem Shabbos. Certainly, if the korban of the nosi is only deiche, that means their isur remains. Elamayir push away the isur. Was demot heises no chal shalei kehegen, still called shalei kehegen. Amen for chil Shabbos. It's mamish like chil Shabbos. No, but Yirah Shah, where the isur nitche bepeil to the korban. Yirah Shah is get pushed away. So certainly it doesn't make sense to say that as a schar for keeping Shabbos, his Einikel will bring the korban when the korban is doing Chil Shabbos. Elamais Chil Shabbos you're allowed. That's the schar for Shmir Shabbos. But that's if you hold this nitche. But now feel Leib says hutra, even if your matter maintains nor as it's not talking Chil. Your matter means that it's not called desecrating Shabbos. But it's over it can pull of a techen for Shmir Shabbos. But you can't say this is called keeping Shabbos. There's no Yisr here. Sunday there is no Yisr either. You can't say Sunday I'm doing a malacha, which is allowed. It's Shmir Shabbos. It's not Chilul Shabbos. So this was all zayin aschar of Shmir Shabbos. So his bringing the korban will be schar of Shmir Shabbos. It's the phone gufa gedrungi. We come with a new idea here. This proves as like them medrash, the fourth medrash we're bringing, or the korban on the sea in Shabbos ukin haisofa in Shmir Shabbos. Bringing the korban Shabbos is not only not Deicha Shabbos, but it's Hutra Shabbos, it's Shmira Shabbos. It adds into keeping Shabbos. What does that mean? But that's because of the Shleimer, the Beer, that the Pshat is like this. The Rebbe goes into this is we have to keep track. The firma more medrash anal tells in Bechlolas of Tzvei Sugim. The four medrashim that we said basically are two categories, two types. The drasha does eine gewen karbona shleike eigen. This drash that the korban, like the first medrash we wrote, that the korban was shleike eigen, not proper. Und der drash ze korban deiches Shabbos, ein korban yochid deiches Shabbos. And the third medrash that we brought, that this is deiches Shabbos and not a korban yochid. Beide in Pasha Yigimah, both in Pasha Yigimah, stellen sich at kolos inye from korbanos nesim. There, what's he talking about? In both these medrashim, talking about the general idea of the nesim's korbanos. Was eine von the Kedushin Shever, Korbanos and Nesim, which is another one of the special things of this Korban Nesim, amongst many other dinim and Chidushim in the Korban Nesim, is given but the Korban Nesim Dechek Shabbos. Korban Nesim Dechek Shabbos. So both of these midrashim are there. What inyan are they talking about? The specialty of Korban Nesim. Mashenka the andere zwei droshes, beide in Pasha Yidal. He wants to say that the both in Pasha Gimel is one section, one type of Korban, one type of what he's saying, and in Pasha Yidal, which is the other medrash, second medrash, and the fourth medrash, are talking about when it says Ani Oarti, the second medrash that we brought before, the David says, "Don't worry, I told him to do it. Don't think it was Mechal Shabbos. I told him to do it." Umi, and the fourth medrash, which says Mi Gnemani V'Ashalom, that this is a reward for Yosef keeping Shabbos. Both of them stellen sich auf dem Posik. They're both discussing the Posik where it says Vayem Ashvi Nosel of Ephraim. It talks specifically about the korban that Ephraim brought on the seventh day, which is Shabbos. They're both talking about the specialty of the korban of Ephraim, of Shabbos. So the other two, the first two, are talking about the specialty of korbanos hanesim b'chlal, because that's what he's discussing there. He's discussing korbanos, and this is one of the things. And the other two, the second and the fourth, are talking about what's special about Ephraim and the specialty of Shabbos. So if you go with that you categorize it that way, you could say that the chilek aklolich, which in the Tzvei Sugim means that the difference between these two categories, these two madrashim and these two madrashim, is like this. In the erste zwei droshes, the first two, which are talking about the general idea of the Kabbanas and Nesim, their greatness, and amongst that greatness is that it's Deicha Shabbos. Reden wegen Kabbanas Nesim, wird herausgebracht wie der Linie von Chias Shabbos, ist Adin, was ist verbunden mit Kolos Kabbanas Nesim, they're trying to bring out that it was Deicha pushed away Shabbos, and you're allowed to bring the Korban on Shabbos, is part of the greatness of the Korban on Nesim. And the Korban on Nesim, for the Chanukas on Mizbeach, has this Maile that could Deicha Shabbos. The says that Mitzater Maile Klolis from Chanukas on Mizbeach on the Korbanos on Nesim, because the Chanukas on the Korbanos of the Nesim is so great, is the Akrova Deicha Shabbos. So it's an extension, a part of the general idea of the specialty of Korbanos on Nesim. That's why it's Deicha Shabbos. Aber in the andere zwei Medrashim, the other two Medrashim, it's wegen dem Korban Yuchat von Nossi Ephraim Be'em HaShabbos, they're specifically talking about this Korban of Ephraim that was brought on Shabbos. Is Mevuya wie the Tchia is nicht mitzad the Klolos Korbanos HaNesim. There it comes out that we're not talking about the Meile of the Korbanos HaNesim, and that's why it's Deicha Shabbos. That being Deicha Shabbos is a detail in the general dinim of the Korbanos HaNesim. Nicht kan din Chanukas HaMizbeach. So It's not because it's a din, how great the general idea of the dedication of the Mizbeach to the Nisim. Nor v'dasis adin in Hilchas Shabbos. There it's talking about something in Shabbos. There's a din in Shabbos that the Ephraim was allowed to bring. As Mechat Shabbos, for the Nosi Gedav them Makdam in Korban. Because of Shabbos, the Nosi had to bring the Korban. The other one is because Korban is on the Siyam. And this other two are talking about the Maila of Shabbos, that Shabbos, Mechat Shabbos had to do it. When in them Gufa, now we'll see where it's a din Hilchas Shabbos. In that Gufa, since a din Hilchas Shabbos can be learned on this itself, you can learn in two ways. When we say it's a din Hilchas Shabbos, you can learn two ways. Number one, Amisad Hilchas Shabbos is Takrava Mutter. Looking from Hilchas Shabbos point of view, so usually things are osir. This was mutter. The says it's nita ninya was is mutter. It's like mailas kabbanas and nesim Chanukah samazbeich. It's not allowed because Chanukah samazbeich is so special that you're allowed to do it on Shabbos. And Teira Zok that the mailas of kabbanas and nesim is as they grace. The greatness of the kabbanas and nesim is so big. Thus vekti but there be some malacha b'Shabbos that outweighs the malacha b'Shabbos. Thus atnai and isura malacha b'Shabbos. It's a condition when the Teira made Shabbos osir. Is a condition. Now, beyachat to the karbonis is the karbonis. It's part of Din Shabbos. When the Torah asked at Shabbos, this was not included. We know that when there's a conflict between a positive mitzvah and a negative mitzvah, you can't do both. For instance, just to give one an example, that's the classical example. There's a Isra Allah, so you're not allowed to cut off a nega. If a person has a nega in any part of his body, not to cut it off. What happens if a person has a nega on the order and he has a din bris milah, you have to cut off the order. So what do? You're going to cut off the order to do the mitzvah, the positive mitzvah of the Eser of mitzvah's bris, you'll be able automatically the Eser of cutting off a nega. If you're going to want to keep the Eser of cutting off a nega, you won't do the mitzvah of bris. So what do? Eser deichal. So the Eser is more important, pushes away. So there you have some says it says as the Eser bet at night from welchem the lav is abhängig totally. It's some say it's not the pshat that you have the lav and the Eser overrides the lav. In the lav itself, the chatchila was made excluding in the case where you have to do a bris. The lav is when the chatchila nitchal nafal v'sidot kegni ma'eser. That's the pshat. Not only you have an av and they're both there. So same thing in here. We want to say that this way we're saying that you're allowed to bring these kabbanas on Shabbos is not because it overrides the korban from the sea is so important. It's because it never was part of Shabbos. It's a din in Hilchas Shabbos. In the Easter Malacha Shabbos, it doesn't apply to this. That's one way to learn. The second way is Akravas HaKavanas b'Shabbos Achilik Mitzvah Shabbos. That it's not only there's no Easter on Shabbos, l'chatchila. It's part of the mitzvahs of Shabbos. When the Eibishter gave mitzvahs of Shabbos, he said, you can't do a malacha, but part of the mitzvah of Shabbos, the kabbanas on the sim should be brought. Kishay, the mitzvah Kedusha Shabbos, and the malacha also Shabbos, just because Shabbos is holy. You're not allowed to do malacha Shabbos. Azay is Kedusha Shabbos, mechayim mizomarkas on Musaf Shabbos. So Shabbos says you have to bring karbanas and musa. For instance, concerning the korban that you bring on Shabbos, the special korban, it's a question whether it's called Chilul Shabbos or not. No, when the Eibishter said, I want you to do the mitzvah of Shabbos. The mitzvah of Shabbos contains, don't do a malacha, bring in the Beis Hamikdash a korban musa, which is a malacha. That's part of Shabbos. Al derazah krovas nosi echad layim haShabbos. That when he said that you have every day the nosi should bring a korban, including Shabbos, was amarti dem korban should nosi Ephraim b'Shabbos. The Eibishter says, I said it. Und durch dem darf du mit Niskayim Shmira Shabbos Kedabon. If you bring that korban, then you're forget keeping the Shabbos. Al derech when we find the svara of a day when you get pekuach nefesh, we find a similar svara when it comes to pekuach nefesh. That we said before, it's a question: is it tchuya or hutra? If it's a danger of your life, you're allowed to mechal Shabbos. Is it deicha push the way the Shabbos are market? So there is a svara and a day. Adas meint need blaze at the pekuach nefesh is deicha the misa melocha b'Shabbos. It doesn't mean that it's deicha pushes away Shabbos, or that I feel like the melocha but mutter b'Shabbos, or even the second way that it's a lot of Shabbos. There's a third opinion. The pekuach nefesh is a din in shmira Shabbos. If you do something that's also on Shabbos and you do it in order to save a life, this by doing that you're keeping Shabbos. See, the other two ways you're definitely not keeping Shabbos. One way is you're able to Isa Shabbos, but you're allowed to. The second way was you're not even able to Isa Shabbos. Now is the third way. This is what the Torah wants you to how to keep Shabbos. Well, Pizay Yumte was a Sheikh Hilchas Shabbos that explains why this din that Pikuach Nefesh is Deicha Shabbos is written in Hilchas Shabbos. Where should it be written? For telling you the din that how important Pikuach Nefesh is, it should be written in Hilchas Pikuach Nefesh. It's written in Hilchas Shabbos. Why? Because Shabbos requires you. It's the mitzvah of Shabbos. Because it's Meisiv in Shmira Shabbos that adds in Shmira Shabbos. And what makes you say so that this is not just Hutra or Tchuya, but it's part of keeping Shabbos? In the Lent of from Shomer and the Yisrael Shabbos. We learn it out when it says you should keep Shabbos. We learn now that Pikuach Nefesh is Deicha. So it learned out from the Posik V'Shomras HaShabbos. Well, the Rechaim says, Loma Ne'emish L'chal Shabbos Al-Chela. Why should you be Mechal Shabbos Al-Chela? Ein ze Korui Chilu. Adarab is a Korui Shmira Shabbos. It's called keeping Shabbos. Actually, the Rechaim even gives us Bore. Says, why Taka could you Mechal Shabbos for Pikuach Nefesh? Because one of the reasons is Chalal v'Shabbos Achas that Yishma Shabbos is Harbe. It's worth to be Mechala one Shabbos, so he'll save his life. So now he'll live for many years. He'll be able to keep many Shabbosim. So this is not against Shabbos. This is part of what Shabbos wants. Usually we think there's a conflict between the two. One wins over the other, whether it's Chuya or Hutra, but the one wins over the other. He's saying another win. The one that you're going against is telling you, go against me because this is what I want. And the Rabbi even has in that place brings it that it's even more than that. Because according to the Rechaim, the pshat is that this Shabbos you take a mechalo. But because of that, there is more Shmira Shabbos. The Rebbe learns even more, even this Shabbos. In a different place, the Rebbe learns this Shabbos, it's Shmira Shabbos. Because the whole thing of Shabbos, why does the Eibush want us to keep Shabbos? To show that there's a connection with the Yidden and the Eibush cares about Yidden. When you are Mechal Shabbos in order to save a life, that accomplishes what keeping Shabbos accomplishes. What's keeping Shabbos accomplished? To show that Eibush loves the Eden. Yeah, Eibush loves the Eden's life. Anyway, the evidence bring us here. But so the same thing here also. You could say that when we say that these Kabbanas and Nisim were brought on Shabbos, so or Tchuya or Hutra, we said before, now we have another thing. Not only Tchuya or Hutra, even it's more than Hutra. This is Hutra means that you're not Mechal Shabbos at all. This is part of Shabbos. Ab ich sehe, moving the roof to von the letzten zwei Medrashim in Parasha Yid Gimel, Dalet legabe der erste zwei, Parasha Yid Gimel. Now we know that the second category of the Medrashim in Parasha Yid Dalet, what are they saying different than the way it says in the other two Medrashim Parasha Yid Gimel? Leib, the Medrashim in Parasha Yid Gimel is the Heter HaKrovim Tzadadim called it from Kabbanas Anasim Canal. In the two Medrashim Parasha Yid Gimel, it's talking, why are you allowed to bring the Kabbanas of Shabbos? It's because the specialty is because of the Kabbalas Anasim. So it's pshat that there is a problem here because it's against Shabbos. Kabbalas Anasim has a special din that they override. The chilik b'neim is not in them. It could be that this two Medrashim, they both hold that this is Be'emes Osir. The difference is, see that it's Tchuya or Hutra can also behave. One Medrash comes out that it's Tchuya, Shleikeg, in other ones it's not, it's Hutra. But both hold that it's not a din in Shabbos. It's a din that the Kabbalas Anasim have this power. Schenke the Medrashim, Sheva Parsha Yudala, the Medrashim and the other Parsha. Was reden the Yuchel wegen dem Korban Shabbayim HaShabbos HaShvi, that they talk about the Korbanos of Shabbos, means the seventh day of the Chanukas HaBisamigdal, of Esmeach, halten beide Sadin in Shabbos. They both hold Sadin in Shabbos. Und der Rebbe ist in beide Medrashim nicht mutig, der Ausgeteiltkeit von dem Korban, der Miet, was ist kein Korban Zibur, und der Fasel rein der Krove, together Hutra. They both hold, in both of them, you don't see that this Korban is different, because it's like a Korban Zibur. And because it's a Korban Zibur, you're allowed to do it. Because before we said that there's a Svara, because it's a Korban Zibur, it's not Chuya, it's Hutra. In the Medrash Anal Pasha Gimel, Zeh Korban Deicha Shabbos, even that Medrash where it says that it's Hutra, says this Korban is Deicha Shabbos, because the Maila of the Korban Nasim, which automatically means there's a Korban Nasim which is special, more special than Shabbos, so you're allowed to do it. So the other place says it's Chuya, this place says Hutra. But nor here's Fakir, the opposite. He says the Adgosha with the Korban Anosi is in gather from the Korban Yochid. Fakir, we're saying it's a Korban Yochid. Not because it's a Korban Tzibur. But in Korban Yochid Eichas HaShabbos, because the Medrash uses the Lashon. Korban Yochid is not Eichas Shabbos. V'zeh hikir b'Shabbos even Shabbos. Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu, David said, Hani Amarti, I said. What did David say? Shehei Makir Kabodin b'Shabbos, Mash'ein Yochid Makir. He said that you should be Makir this Korban HaShabbos, which a regular Yochid can. What's the pshat here? It's like a Korban Yochid. So why are you allowed? It's even more than Hutra. But before we said, if it's a Korban Yochid, it's Tchuya. If it's a Korban Tzibur, it's Hutra. Now we're saying no, because to remain a Korban Yochid. And it's still more than that. From the heter akrovas akorm l'dasma the Rosh Hashanah is not while the karbonas hom sich anim take it meyuchet. So if you say it's hutro, the pshat is, and it's according to Tzibur, there's something special in this korban. The Shaila is so special that it's according to Tzibur. But that's not what we're saying. So according to other ways, there's something special in the korban, has a special inyan, a special strength. And the far as I say, deicha Shabbos beifon shel hutro. To push a Shabbos, it's mutter. We're not saying that. Nor while Shabbos zok, we're saying another thing. Shabbos, it's a korban yochid. But Shabbos says, Azeh Yaakov b'Shabbos, I feel zaydik a korban yochid. It's a korban yochid, but there's a special din in Shabbos. Then we don't care if it's a tzibur or not. Shabbos wants that this should be in Mikram Shabbos. But it's very the Moshe tells sich and the zwei Yafanim and the Azeh, this is the Adin Shabbos. And nevertheless, there are two Midrashim. In this inyan that's part of Shabbos is also a difference. Late Medrash Ani Yomarti. Late Medrash where it says that I said they should do it. It was kilo diatnai in Shabbos. I said this is a condition in Shabbos. A Shabbos zokt. The word zokt is in quotation. Shabbos says, as if them korban is b'achilun michal derisa Shabbos. It's a din in Shabbos. But it's not Lavdav Kishmira Shabbos. Shabbos says that the whole din of Shabbos, when it was given, that you're not allowed to do Malach, didn't apply to this. That's what the Medrash says. Don't say that, how could you Michal Shabbos? I said so. I said, why is it not Chil Shabbos? Well, that's Apiyat Tzibur. David just said, which means when David, the same David said, you're not allowed to Malach on Shabbos, said that Shabbos, this is part of Dini Shabbos, and it's okay to do Malach. It says in Poskim, when the Mechilta says Mechaleleh Meis Yumas, it says anybody is Mechal Shabbos, the Posik says you die. Then the Posik says Vayema Shabbos Shnei Kvosim. But Shabbos you have to bring two special korban musaf, two sheep. So the Medrash says Shnei Mediber Echad Memrim. They were set together, two opposite dinim. Here it says don't Mechal Shabbos, you get to die, and here it says bring these two shech, these two animals. Leidia Shebishah Shehutazeh Nesazeh Lamed Kein Zechil Shabbos. That B'Shaz the Torah was Mati the korban. It's the same time the Torah Asat Melacha. Because in the Torah Asad Melacha, the Torah Lechatchila said it doesn't apply to this. They go together. And to teach you that's not Chil Shabbos. So you have like this. We have sometimes soft come four things. One is that Shabbos is Tchuya, in this case, because of the specialty of the Nesiim. Another thing, Shabbos is Hutra, because they specifically call Nesiim. Then we have another thing now, that it's not because of the might of the Nesiim. Lechatchila there is no Yisr. Not it's Hutra. Hutra means it was Osir, but the Torah was Matir. Tchuya means it's still Osir, but you're allowed to. Hutra means it was Osir. There's a third way now. It's a Dini Shabbos that was never included in Disa Shabbos. That's one. Like the Medrash was Zog, but the other Medrash it says Ados is given beged eschad. If there was Yosef Shimon as a Shabbos actually nitno, that this was a reward for Yosef keeping Shabbos. Kum Turis, it comes out. Ados is nitno at 9 Shabbos. Another in condition of Shabbos. As Korban Nosi Ephraim from Elohim is mutter b'Shabbos. That the Korban Nosi, the Korban of the Ephraim, which was on Shabbos, is Chatchila mutter on Shabbos. It's more than that. He says this was a reward for keeping Shabbos. This is a reward because this is called keeping Shabbos. The Korban is Meisif in Gdusha Shabbos, as in Gdusha Shabbos. Well, the Rebbe says, like he said, another place. The Pirish Divra Mechilta now Beimekese. Rebbe explains in a different place the Pshat in this Mechilta, where it says that the din that you're not allowed to Mechala Shabbos, and the din you could bring Korban Musaf on Shabbos, were set together. So now the Rebbe said Pshat and set together means that when he made the Yisra Shabbos, at the same time he allowed this, that Korban Musaf of Shabbos is not included. But there's a deeper Pshat. Ados was b'diber echad nem remained, that when it says was said in one dibur together, nit nor as and nit say says not as a contradiction. Chatchila wasn't also. Nor beide haben demselben Teichen. They both have the same contents. Both are Kedusha Shabbos. Not only that there's no Iser, Chatchila no Iser. They both are even positive at Kedusha Shabbos. Z is this Shmira Kedusha Shabbos comes. Number one, durch Hakrovas Akvasi, by bringing the Karbonis, und durch Isa Malacha, that you don't do Malacha. Und der Fahre, das Schar Masem to Shmira Shabbos to Yosef. That's what it's a smart fit. It's a Schar that fits to the fact that Yosef kept Shabbos. He Shabbos based off, and since he kept Shabbos extra, what for the extra? Actually, no, wasn't given. He didn't have to, and he was Meisiv and he had it. But did he bring a get Mahi Sofi Shmira Shabbos? So he got as a reward that there's something more in Shabbos that he had Gabandarim, which other Yidden didn't have. Dafke Ben Bincho Dafke, his grandson, but Meisik event Bekdusha Shabbos, added in Dusha Shabbos, Ruchmakar and Akor Meyuchad Shabbos, we're bringing special Korban Shabbos. So now we understand all the Midrashim, all the different Midrashim, how they learn different Pshatim. This is, you have to review it now, go into the car to make it, someone should make a chart according to each way to learn, but it comes out so good, so geschmack, and it fits to all the different words. And this is where we're going to stop. The rest is a sofa, and it's very short. So for today, we're going to stop here. Okay.
Shkayach.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.